difficult to engage in international talks. Nonetheless, it was very interesting to see how the German and the British examples structures very well and do foresee an engagement also at the international level, what we call today cyber international relations. You mentioned at the end NATO. There is no doubt NATO is growing as a center of gravity for ensuring coherence between cyber defense strategies at the national level. But as the subject today is the European Union, I would like to turn the floor to Minister Incarnato, who is probably one of the most expert on the field, having served years both at the Italian delegation to the European Union and the Italian delegation to NATO. So I'm very keen in listening what the coordinator for cyber international relations at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has to say regarding the role of the European Union. So without further ado, I give the word to Gianfranco. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, going. Fine. Thank you very much. Well, I'm late because I was supposed to end 10 minutes ago. So if you all don't mind, I will skip almost 50% of my presentation. Some of the points I was willing to make were already described, settled by colleagues. A few words of introduction. You will see that there is a logic in my distribution of table of contents. As mentioned, I'm the cybersecurity coordinator at the Directorate for Political Affairs at the Farnesina, but I'm also the nuclear security Sherpa. So what does it mean? Two fields quite distant, but not so much. Now, turning to the content, the subject of our discussion. The starting point, came several years ago. But of course, it was difficult at the EU level to shape, frame, table a clear strategy. Nevertheless, starting 2013, the Commission presented an important document. Please forgive me, I will not enter, some points of this document were already mentioned. I will not enter into it, but please consider, let's say, 1 hour, to spend 1 hour of your time in reading this document. It is an open, safe, and secure cyberspace. You will find it very easily. It was published the 7th of February 2013. It's less than 30 pages. Many describe this document as very ambitious. Today, personally, this is diplomats, as you know, don't have personal judgments. They simply have to reflect others' opinion. But let me try to give some personal hint to my presentation. I do have to describe that strategy as very realistic and, how to say, I should add, a little bit unfortunate. This is the word opening for the stumbling blocks that we want to raise today. It is an important document. Please read it. You will find a lot of useful things. But if I may, basically the posture of the European Union, of the European Union institutions, which is not the European Union and its member states. And here we will have already a stumbling block. But the posture of the European Union was key to human rights, privacy, protection of your rights, our rights. Because no matter how do they declare their policies, your data are not in your hands. You already are in elsewhere. Your location. Now, they know, Google knows where you are. What are you doing? How many people you met? And well, they probably don't know till now what I'm saying, but they will. Exactly. They will soon.
It's a microphone.
Exactly. So the bulk was that the so-called the cyberspace, many definition of cyberspace, as Professor Colajanni stressed in an intimate comment, cyberspace is not ours. It's not physical. Has no limits, has no boundaries, and most important for governments, it's out of their control. Here you can see the most important critical fact for governments. Governments fix policies, fix their role, and in many cases they have, in this case, they are mostly in the declaratory posture. Tools are not in their hands. The companies, the over-the-top, the few companies that own everything have the capabilities. They develop software, everything needed. And the capabilities for governments are limited, very limited. And in fact, they also have another dramatic problem. You would imagine that governments have millions of people in their hands. Not at all, because most of them, 95% if more of them, are not for toys like this. They must produce services. They must be active in real life. If you want to enter in this domain, you must have capabilities otherwise useless. And here, and I join our French colleague, what is the excellent capability otherwise useless? The military. If you are in peace, all the armies are simply waiting for war, unless you give them other kind of jobs, other kind of activities, which is, for example, less than war activities, peacekeeping operations, blah, blah, so on and so forth. Something close also to civil protection, for example, civil emergencies, or why not? Interesting enough, also cyber, their role, some role in the cyber domain would be interesting, because otherwise they will simply wait and see, doing nothing. That's why the military, and I do understand and do recognize the posture, the attitude, the strategy, the approach of the French and the UK, but with some similarities, but with another balance between public and private. I think that the French strategy is more state-driven than the UK strategy, but nevertheless, they address the defense, the security-related aspects, addressing the tools, the capabilities they do hold. Governments can ask every time to the military to do something. They cannot do the same for civilian capabilities, because civilian capabilities are supposed to work for other kind of activities, and they are active. Then one step backward. In 2013, the strategy, the European strategy, already mentioned some issues, some critical issues. The most important of that was the need to establishing a common, unique, continental digital single market. It was a very important target, but in just less than 2 hours, the Vice President of the Commission, ANSIP, will present the Commission digital single market strategy. So more than 2 years passed, and the European institutions were unable to move a step forward in this important critical area. Just few minutes after today, 12 o'clock, Mr. Ansip will table the European Commission Digital Single Market Strategy approach. Is it the end of the story? No, it's simply the beginning. Simply the beginning. Another important, very important area tackled in the European strategy of still February 2013, the Network and Information Security Directive, the NIS, as we all call it. The NIS is still there, and you already mentioned some problems in addressing the content, the aim of the NIS. Some member states aiming at a compulsory, ambitious, coercive, if I may, NIS, with also implications for the over-the-top, the American, the few, because we, at the very beginning, the digital space was the heaven of free market, the heaven of competition. Now it's the hell. There's no competition at all. 3, 4 major players. They dominate all. And that's why, for example, one of the most critical areas and the most important institutions that at the EU level are addressing these issues are the very same areas that President Monti was addressing when Commissioner for open markets, free trade, but also avoiding oligopolistic positions. There must be competition. There must be players, many players, if we are still committed to our liberal and free societies. This is not the case. And if there is competition, yes, there is indeed. It's not coming from Europe, not yet, at least at my knowledge, unless Germany will succeed in shaping, framing a sort of Airbus project. Do you remember the Airbus project? At that time, it was almost the same. 2 American big companies monopolizing the production of airplanes. That was it. And then Franco-German and others initiative trying to break this situation, offering to the market a new, ambitious, effective competitor. Airbus was such a competitor and is such a competitor. Now it's one of the main players in the world. But today, the key competitors, the strong competitors, are in China. Huawei, other companies, the Chinese companies, and the almost 500,000 engineers working every day in this area, and they are supposed to join to be 1 million in 3 years. They do provide the alternative they do want to compete with the US. That's why, for example, President Obama was so key in stressing that the new strategic approach of the US had to address the China challenge, the Chinese impact on this. So, stumbling blocks, I already mentioned two. If we don't have a digital single market approved, agreed by member states, if we don't have the Network and Information Security Directive approved, the draft was already approved by the Parliament, the European Parliament, but of course, as you can imagine, it's almost nothing. Well, we will not reach any positive conclusion. We will not have the EU, a sort of European cyberspace, which would be, I must confess, the turning point also for those who deny actually the importance of having such a cyberspace, such a continental dimension, because they will simply have to invest more, much more, to run a lot of more risks, and to have less benefits from their investments. So if you want to waste your money, please go. If we have a continental perspective, and the we means, if I come to the starting point of our discussions, means in particular Italy, because we have a digital divide, not as consumers, because we all make a lot of use of the cyberspace, but we are not significant producers, not at all, and we still have an enormous digital divide. But let me simply come to a final point. Again, I don't want to enter into many areas. I have no time, but I would like to mention a few words coming from Javier Solana, was EU representative for foreign and security policies in recent years. Well, speaking about cyber and cyber attacks, he recently stressed in April the 30th in the World's Opinion page, Project Syndicate, a community of policymakers, a US community of policymakers. He simply mentioned that cyber attacks take place in a medium cyberspace where offensive actions, as mentioned already, have an advantage over defensive ones, as you mentioned, Fabio. Indeed, most of cyberspace infrastructures was designed to ensure its interoperability and openness, often at the expenses of security, which tends to limit usability. Of course, if you want a wonderful loft and you want to enjoy at length the fantastic panorama in front of your apartment, you don't close windows. You don't put barriers into your windows. You want open space. That was the original thinking about cyber. But of course, now we are turning to other dimensions. And in addressing the other dimensions, again, Mr. Solana stresses that the effectiveness of approaches like this, the one mentioned, is limited by the fact that the three largest cyberspace powers, the United States, China, and I forgot Russia, exactly, have not agreed on a common treaty to harmonize national laws or facilitate cooperation. We will come to the second part of my competencies. nor do they cooperate on the issue through other institutions, with the exception of the G20 and the United Nations. Recent cases of cyber espionage have generated growing mistrust, even among traditional allies like the US, the European Union and the US. In the interest of defending their sovereignty, this is the critical point I think, states could begin to interfere in the technical governance that has proved so efficient. At some point, the multi-stakeholder governance, and we already had some anticipations of this in the very recent global conference on cyberspace in The Hague a few weeks ago. At some point, this multi-stakeholder approach is killing everybody except the bad guys, because the public-private partnerships, yes, but to do what? What kind of responsibilities for the public and the private and the civil society? Yes, how to shape their role. For example, I think that we all have a voice to raise in this debate. But is there any framework in which we can, now I'm speaking not as diplomat, but as citoyen. Again, let me conclude with Mr. Solana again. The danger of international conflict has worsened in the past few months, not years, months, eroding whatever trust existed between the powers. Cyberspace risks becoming a battleground on which governments, non-state actors, and the private sector all clash. But we should not be pessimistic. Let me conclude by simply addressing another point. The international community has put in place minimal codes that regulate areas like health and nuclear weapons proliferations. There is no reason why we cannot do the same in cyberspace. That's my final point. We did how to protect ourselves from a nuclear attack. At that time, it was clear what kind of consequences a nuclear attack had, and what was the strategy for a defensive strategy? To hide everybody underground? To have our cities hundreds of meters below the surface? There was no possibility at all to protect ourselves from a nuclear attack. But slowly, not so much, first there was the notion of deterrence. And we already had some mentioning of the active measures that some governments, some strategies do consider as the ultimate frontier in this domain. But there was also a need for a global compact, the great game of diplomacy, to put diplomacy here at the table, and it was the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, addressing the risk of proliferation in the nuclear domain. But the problem is that, as in that case, there was a balance, a deal between those who had and have, and those who had not. I should leave to your imagination, where are we?
Thank you, Gianfranco. Thank you very much. I think it's very difficult to understand cyberspace because, as Serena, Lisi at the beginning said, the national definition, the definition that normally we find in books about cyberspace, describe 3 layers. a physical layer where you have the hardware, cables, connection. Then you have a logical layer, software. They make links between computer possible. And then you have the data of the users, right? So it's a complex reality, in fact. But there is no doubt, and I think the presentation we heard this morning make it very evident that it is nonetheless a political reality, a political dimension. And what I take from Gianfranco's presentation is that the European Union is caught in a trap, in a way, because if it's true that cyberspace is a political reality, it's also true that the European Union is struggling between the two poles that constitute its history, which is national prerogatives and multilateral common interests. So with these few words, I would like to give the floor to Michele Colajanni, professor from the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia, just for a few comments to steer the discussion, for which we will then have just 15-20 minutes. We are running a little late. So without further ado, Michele, thank you.
Thank you, Fabio, and thank you for this invitation. I'm really proud to be here. I am the technological side. I mean, I'm the different view and in this table, in this panel. And from the technological point of view, we don't see many solutions. So please don't leave to us the decisions. I mean, any technical person has a short-term view. And I'm here mainly to receive a long-term view. Politics is a strategy. And unfortunately, in most national documents, I don't see strategies. I see operations, I see tactics, because public-private partnership is not a strategy. Awareness is not a strategy. A national CERT is not a strategy. A European CERT is not a strategy. I mean, these are just means to reach a strategy that at a European level, unfortunately, I don't see. If you want an example of strategy, you can look at Israel. Israel has a strategy. I want to become the second cyber power of the world. A strategy is just one line. UK, security is not a cost. Security gives competitive advantage. So I want to build the safest place for economy, for digital economy, for financial economy. This is a strategy. Then there are other unsaid strategies. I would not explain in public, but one was declared, I don't remember, it was Germany. Germany now has a strategy. 5 years ago, Germany had not a strategy. Now, even if not clearly declared, this country has a strategy to lead the Europe in a cyberspace. So the German view to the Europe. So is Europe, and this may be the first question, accept the German power in cyberspace as his own strategy? And the other point that I got from Incarnato is the citizen, the power of citizen. We are living in a revolution. If you feel unsafe, it's not because of us, it's not because of cyberspace. No, it's not our fault. It's not only our fault, at least. When you live in a digital, in a revolution, I mean, I don't think that people during the French Revolution felt safer than us. I mean, a revolution is unsafe by definition. So we are destroying industries, supply chains, but we are also creating novel skills, novel jobs. So this is the unsafe point. And from the technological point of view, this will become worse and worse because it's easy to forecast the viewpoint from the technological point of view. I mean, if you put any electronic and software device in your car, you will have an unsafe car. If you will put digital device in your smart home, you will have an unsafe smart home or smart city, smart industry, whatever you, and in the next future, smart body with electronic device embedded in our body. So this is normal because technology is made by human, often under market pressure, and human make mistakes, and professional attackers take advantage of these mistakes. There is no doubt. So in this cat and mouse game, we will lose forever because professional attackers are really good, a really skilled person. And so there is no person that can defend himself. So I want to leave my comment and my questions in a positive sense, not just with these problems. So the first question is, there are in a revolution losers and winners. The winners are professional attackers and the multinational cyber industries. And some states, a very few number of states, of countries. The losers are the large majority of populations, the large majority of countries, and the large majority of companies. So, if I can ask you, do you think that one day this strong majority will say enough is enough and will react to this dominance of concentration of power, concentration of data?
Well, the answer is quite complex, but I don't know if some subjects, some I would say, well, let's start again. I don't know if some actors will react, but what I know now is that we cannot apply cyber deterrence. That's the point. The only way to react is to use resilience, to create resilient systems. Then maybe if we create resilient system, one day we can say enough is enough. Because a resilient system is just like a human body. A resilient system can be attacked, but can heal later on, can be repaired later on. Then, enough is enough, maybe. That's an answer.
I don't know, maybe. Maybe. I don't know if the body is enough resilient to cyber attackers. I don't think so, but the problem is that we have countries that take advantage of their companies. We have countries that take advantage of this cyber power. And to another question to the other speaker, most strategies are defensive. I'm just an engineer and not a political scientist, so I don't know the history. I don't know if any defensive strategy that emerged from this document has ever won in the past. I mean, a strategy is by definition an active, is action, is not, cannot be defensive. If your strategy is just defensive, you lose by definition. This is my point. So I want to become, I mean, a strategy as a direction, and putting just, and I don't mean that active strategies is creating cyber attackers group. I mean, this is, again, is not a strategy, is an operation, is a tactics. What I will hear, what I will take home from my side, this is the main reason why I'm here, is to receive the real strategy of Europe, the convergence, where Europe wants to go, not just defending our...
I would like to take the floor just to mention some events. I think that many things, everything, as far as cyberspace is concerned, came from the United States, and some important new steps are coming from the United States. Again, also addressing the issue of people interests, people concerns. Yesterday, turning to France, yesterday, l'Assemblée nationale approved a text, controversial text, putting under surveillance all the critical data that can be related also to terrorism, so on and so forth. But it's difficult to frame, to have the dividing line. And as you see, the most common definition of the current cyberspace is Wild West, coming from President Obama to many other people. And what was the evolution of the Wild West? The sheriff. What is important to all of us, I think, who is going to appoint the sheriff? If we need a sheriff, the important thing is for us to be able to nominate the sheriff and to have our sheriff at place. That's why, for example, as far as interceptions, some active measures, the EU approach would be, okay, let's do, but if subject to the rule of law, if decided by commissioners, by appropriate people. But again, let me stress the final point coming to the US. The US lawmakers introduced legislation to end spy agencies' bulk collection of American telephone data. Republicans and Democrats. The move is coming from the US, and in a sort of preventive action, President Obama himself stressed that he still wants to retain the mass data collection program as a national security tool, but with substantial changes. Here, the window of opportunity for all of us, those substantial changes, because the way we were dealing with cyberspace, the way we were doing business or defense activities or intelligence, it's finished. We must turn the page, and the most important thing to do is to have a clear cyberspace diffuse security culture as wide as possible, and people must be aware of the importance of these simple facts, which are not only Instagram, Twitter, or something like that, but much, much more. It implies also our life, basic services, and, for example, for my immediate concerns, the protection of nuclear facilities. You can imagine how important it can be to protect, to avoid a nuclear facility being hacked and services interrupted, or even worse. The most important challenge for a nuclear facility is the end of water services in just a few hours, without having any chances to turn things in the opposite way. The nuclear facility will explode.
Sorry. May I return to my question? I mean, in one sentence, which is the national cyber strategy of France with respect to Europe? Is there any convergence? I don't know if you have your mic.
That should be on. Okay. Well, I think we expressed our strategy in a very complicated way, which is typically French, probably. That they have the best ranking possible. That's probably true. Israel wanted to be the second to the US, right? And we would like to be as close to the US as possible. This is how I would phrase that, probably.
So you mean third place?
Probably, possibly. That's the idea. And maybe before the British.
Of course. Yes.
Italy?
Yes.
Idea.
No, come on. Define in one sentence the national cyber strategy of Italy. Where Italy wants to go with respect to Europe.
My impression is that there is not the political class doesn't perceive the strategic importance of cyber. They think about cyber as a tweak, as a communication, but there is not at the moment yet. So we should lobby the government, the parliament. At this stage, I don't think we have a strategy.
Fabio, do you agree?
I don't know. If you look at the history of the European Union, at the end of the day, it has always been a matter of putting in common particular interests so that they become common interests, and on that you can build governance and look at the future. So in this sense, probably, the European Union does have a key role to play in try to put coherence in the system, right? Try to, as Gianfranco said, try to create those margins within which national ambitions can live happy by themselves, right? So if the European Union will succeed in agreeing on this directive and making sure that the beautiful words of the 2013 strategy are implemented, well then we probably have a voice in the international community which is able to fight that concentration of power you were mentioning before.
Okay. I think
Ça va? Bon.
Excellent anglais.
Merci. Ah bah il faut.
Ceci dit, on peut éventuellement échanger les cartes.
Ah, évidemment, avec grand plaisir. Avec grand plaisir. Elle est où la mienne? Elle est là. En voilà une. Yeah.
You need this form for the reimbursement of your trip?
Yeah.
Okay, I need only, well, it's written passport, but it's okay, the identity card, so
Yeah.
I need to make
I have my passport.
Ah,
Okay.
okay. And you have to fill this? That's in it?
Okay, so I can do it now.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but not, you can do later also.
Okay, all right. What is the deadline?
There. No,
End of the
this-
conference?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's better. But I leave
Very
you
good.
this.
Grazie mille.
And
Okay.
if, yes, if I can have your passport, I do a copy and then
Yeah, I
give
can.
you back.
If you want to make a copy of it, here it is.
Okay,
Right.
perfect. Thank you.
Non lo so. Non lo so. Sì, strategico. Merci beaucoup. Impeccable. Très bien. Impeccable. Parfait. Merci beaucoup. Alors, je remplirai ça tout à l'heure. Je vais ranger ça. Il fait chaud, mais ça va encore. Je pense qu'il fera encore plus chaud. Hein, mais... Oui, oui, oui. Merci. Oui. Merci beaucoup. Très bien. Merci infiniment. Restons en contact avec grand plaisir. Ça pose aucun problème. Merci beaucoup. Ah, sì, c'è la mia business card.
Bravo.
Ok.
Mi ha fatto piacere. Ci keep in touch.
Ok, ok, no problem. No problem. Ok, arrivederci.
Grazie, grazie, perfetto. Io ho una presentazione, sì, che poi non è
Quando
indispensabile.
finite la presentazione eventualmente si rimette più al centro, perché io pensavo di fare una introduzione,
Perfetto.
dopo parla lei.
Lo so,
un po' di
sono
più.
pochissimi,
Direi un po' di
cioè
più.
pochissimi, e beh, ormai che siamo qui.
No, non lo so,
Mi sembra strano perché in genere questi temi attirano tantissimo. Io ho le aule piene quando facciamo cose
sì,
di
pure
questo.
io l'ho fatto a Ancona, 350, no, la magna così, no, anche più
Pienissimo, anche i
grande,
muri.
più grande.
Io
Anche
ho
di
fatto
gente,
ho
sì,
un
perché
progetto
più-
Jamuna finanziato dalla Commissione che dura peraltro tutto l'anno per 3 anni sulla criminalità organizzata. L'ho organizzato in panels differenti, sulla raccolta dati, eccetera, eccetera. Si sono iscritte più di 100 persone, ma per un anno, e mi frequentano. È una cosa...
si vede
Quando è
che-
venuto Roberti, il procuratore Roberti, non avevamo proprio il posto fisicamente, ma tutti ragazzi e non autorità,
sì,
ma
ok.
c'erano centinaia di ragazzi.
Vabbè, prenderemo atto.
Ora intanto ci